All right, so our next speaker is Christine, who is currently a postdoc at CISPA and is on the job market. So if you all are hiring, pay attention to the talk and maybe you found a new colleague. Take it away whenever your technology cooperates. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Hello again to those of you who have seen my earlier talk in the earlier session, and hello to everyone who just joined. So if you happen to have been around in the earlier session, you may have noticed that on the last slide I had as a suggestion to raise awareness of website operators about privacy issues to just tell them. And that's something we tried to do in another project where we conducted a large-scale notification study where we notified websites about different privacy issues. And this is work with my colleagues Matthias, Martin, Ninja, and Ben. And Ninja is a data protection lawyer. So over the last few years since the GDPR went into effect, we've seen that enforcement kind of varied. So in the first few years, there weren't really many big cases, and these have started to show up a bit more often. But typically only the big cases make the headlines, and this leaves us wonder what to do if at scale. Can we measure or help enforcement activities at scale as researchers? So this question came up because notification studies have been around for quite a while in other domains or for other issues. So first they started to show up for abuse notifications, like, hey, your web server is distributing malware, can you please do something about it? And then this was also used to notify website operators about security issues such as Heartbleed or DDoS amplifiers or cross-site scripting. And recently this has also been used for some privacy issues, such as Alina and her colleagues. They've done some research about IP anonymization in Google Analytics. We've heard that earlier today. And the Austrian NGO Neub by Max Schrems, they have notified websites about incorrectly implemented cookie banners that use the OneTrust CMP. And sorry if your favorite notification study is not on here, there are more than these. What these two privacy studies have in common is that they focus on a specific vendor and parameter that can be checked. And we've been wondering if it's also possible to do these kind of notification studies about more complex privacy issues that are a bit harder to check, because in Google Analytics you just need to check for a certain parameter, for example, or for OneTrust, you know what the implementation looks like and can search for specific functions. And yeah, like I just said, we've been wondering if this can also be done for vendor-independent, more complex things. And we were also interested in how do privacy notifications compare to those about security vulnerabilities? Are there distinct challenges? So we conducted a notification study with about 160,000 websites in November and December 2021. We checked the websites daily for their status regarding certain issues. At one point we sent them notification emails, and we also sent operators a survey to learn more about what they thought of the whole thing. So first we need to identify suitable security and privacy issues to check for. And the problem here is that first you need to make sure that privacy laws apply, because security is kind of universal. So if a website can be hacked in one country, it also could be hacked in another country. And then we need to make sure that the issues we notify operators about are universally considered an infringement of a privacy law. And this is why we had our data protection lawyer. And we also need to make sure that these issues can be remotely detected with high accuracy. And we selected 2 issues that violate GDPR requirements and 2 that violate the e-privacy directive, like consent for cookies. So the first issue was lack of a privacy policy, because as IP addresses are considered personal data in the EU, then you need a privacy policy as soon as you store IP addresses temporarily in web server logs. Then we used the case of cookie banners. use of third-party cookies without a cookie consent notice. And they've used only selected third-party cookies for which the European data authorities have said, okay, for these, you do need consent, like for social media cookies. And we also had the case of where they did have a banner, but they set the cookies anyway before any interaction with the notice. And our first case was use of personal input fields for personal data without securing it with HTTPS, because GDPR wants you to apply state-of-the-art data protection measures. And as a security issue to compare these privacy issues to, we used publicly accessible GitHub repositories. That has been treated as a security issue in other prior work, and anything invasive would have caused ethical questions like remote code execution or something. So to find a suitable enough set of domains, we chose that was a project called the Internet Backup that had a really big list of domains. People could just upload domains there, and their goal was to compile a list of every domain on the internet. So they had like more than 250 million. And we filtered those for whether they were based in the EU, they served some web content, and they were not present on opt-outs for previous notification studies we did. This left us with 30 million domains. And then we crawled all of these with OpenWPM and our custom checks. This took a really long time, like 2 or 3 months. And during this check, we also checked if those sites were targeted at a public audience, and of course, if they contained any of these issues. And the prevalence of issues we found was it really varied. So for no privacy policy showed up for 17.44% of sites, while only 2.95% of sites did have input field for personal info without HTTPS. Note that we were mostly concerned not to count and not to have false positive cases. And we weren't really concerned with false negatives, because we just want to make sure that we don't unnecessarily notify and alert websites. So we might have underestimated the prevalence of issues. This left us with 6.3 million domains, and from there we sampled about 100,000 domains per issue, because we need to make sure that the domains can be checked within a day. And then we checked them again if they still had the issues by November 2021. This left us with about 160,000 domains. And we split these into different experimental groups and checked them daily for whether the issues were still present. The groups were as follows. So one group was contacted by email addresses we found on the websites. And where we couldn't find an email address, we contacted them via generic email addresses like info@domain or webmaster@domain.com. And then we also were interested in whether the presence of warnings in the email made a difference. So prior work had suggested that. So we added into half of domains, we added some pieces of text where we said, okay, this is a GDPR issue and you can be subject to fines if this persists. And we also had a similar sentence for the e-privacy issues. Then we sent out initial notifications in early November 2021, reminders about 2 weeks later, and in December we debriefed the control group about the issues on their websites. This was what the emails looked like. I totally get that this is hard to read, so it's just about the structure here. So we introduced ourselves, we listed the found issues, then optional warnings, and then we linked to an online report per domain and our survey, and we emailed up to 3 addresses per domain. And the online report is something that the domain could access, and there we showed them each day the status of the last 2 days regarding their domain, so they could check if some changes they had made showed up in our system. And there they also could get some additional info about the study and opt out. So one problem with notification studies is reachability. So because email generics just perform badly, people often just don't implement them. And we had a vastly improved reachability for these email addresses we actually found on websites. And when we look at the actual measurement results over time, it's might be a bit surprising that there's not that much of a difference whether people got an email on or in which group the domains were in. This is a direct influence of the low reachability. But if we ran some numbers, we did find statistically significant influences between the control group and the treatment groups. Even though the effect size was usually very small, this is the diff column, and we saw the biggest effects for the Git notifications. And this was just from 1 week after notifications. We also have some numbers over time, but we didn't find any major difference, except for the no HTTPS case, where some problem rates suddenly became significant after the reminder. We also analyzed what feedback from the survey and emails, and then we learned that security and privacy issues have common challenges. It's hard to reach people, and it's hard to make them believe you that you're not a spammer, and sometimes there's a language barrier. For security notifications, we saw that people had more intrinsic motivation to fix issues, and they were more positive towards our notifications. And we also more often got feedback like, okay, sure, we fixed it already. For privacy, we often saw misconceptions about the applicability of the privacy laws, either because of location or because people claimed that their site didn't collect any data. Also, we noticed, compared to the security issues, a lack of operator interest and motivation to fix privacy issues. And for both cases, we often got questions that asked for more details, what the URL was that caused problems or which cookie caused problems. So what do we learn of all of that? It looks like doing privacy notifications isn't really worth it. But we agree that, or we noticed that measuring these issues at scale is really challenging, so this would benefit from some standardization. Like, even if it's just on a really low scale, like have a standardized location where privacy policies are stored, or have a plain text version of the privacy policy somewhere. Then you could also have a standardized email address where to reach people. One problem was it's hard to convey that we are actually capable of doing something if they don't comply, so teaming up with a DPA would be really beneficial. And we've also been wondering if there are better ways to reach out to operators other than email, because you still run the risk of being classified as spam. We also saw a need for more information, and here concrete guidelines by DPAs would be really useful. And again, like in the previous talk, there's still the open question, how do we educate website operators that privacy laws apply and compliance is important, and it's not just important to fix security issues, but also privacy issues. Thank you.